Welcome back to the Now Morning Show. It's time for us to shine a spotlight on the disaster management system and the role of the ODPM.
When disasters strike beyond the capacity of the 14 regional corporations, or TEMA, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management immediately shifts from monitoring and supporting through the activation of the National Emergency Operations Center as Trinidad and Tobago's Strategic Disaster Coordinating Agency. The ODPM steps in to coordinate our national resources. Together, we utilize an all-of-society approach to save lives and bring relief to our citizens, visitors, and our Caribbean neighbors to build a more resilient Trinidad and Tobago and region. The ODPM coordinates resources during national disasters.
Inside your spotlight this morning, we're chatting with the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management. And to do so, let me welcome Major General Retired Rodney Smart, CEO of the ODPM and Chairman of the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Ruckus, and let me say good morning to your viewership. And thanks for having me.
Not a problem. You're always welcome here. I know every year we chat about getting ready and getting the nation ready as prepared as they can be.
That's
we have the hurricane season starting on June 1st, and of course we already declared the wet season, so things have gotten a little bit sticky. But we wanted to chat a little bit about the role, the function of the ODPM. In terms of, we know the ODPM years ago, everybody would say, you know, you're looking out for when disaster strikes and the ODPM comes. But over the years, we've seen that evolve.
Right.
Now you do more monitoring, you do supporting, and you do coordination for when disaster strikes. Tell me about that journey in the evolution process.
And thanks for the question, because I think it's important that we understand as Trinidad and Tobago how the ODPM has evolved over time. And the ODPM history really goes all the way back to 1963. But over time, the organization as we know it today was established in 2005.
Okay.
And it was established in 2005 because there were two major things that were happening. Globally, we had the Indian Ocean tsunami, where over 200,000 people lost their lives. But just before that, in September 2004, we had a situation where Hurricane Ivan swept through the Caribbean, and it devastated, and we lost lives. In fact, I had the privilege of going to Grenada to provide support to Grenada, and I understood the challenges Grenada faced because Grenada, like us, hadn't been hit with a hurricane for some time. So I understood the importance of making sure that we were prepared. It so happened that second feature, our regional feature, caused the heads of government to decide of a new approach to disaster management, one that is called the comprehensive disaster management approach. Because previous to that, countries all over the world were very response-centric.
Right.
They responded to, but no one was taking the comprehensive approach. And
it was just reactionary approach.
Reactionary. And as a result of that, the ODPM was established to look at disaster management from a holistic approach. And in addition to that, the government will have paired the ODPM with the 1st Engineer Battalion of the Trinidad and Tobago Regiment.
Right.
And the reason for that pairing is that it would provide a response capability in the event something like what happened to Grenada happened to us.
Okay.
So a whole battalion was actually established. Before it was what we call a utility and engineering corps, but it was established as a battalion. In fact, there was an infantry battalion that was repurposed for engineering purpose because they understood that given what the damage that Hurricane Ivan had done, and when they observed what had happened in the Indian Ocean tsunami, so we needed to be stronger as a nation. So the ODPM was born out of that experience.
Right.
And I brought a diagram this morning. I don't know if the camera is able to pick it up. I hope it could. And I'll just put it. And what this shows is the comprehensiveness So it speaks of prevention. It speaks, secondly, of mitigation. The third one, response.
The third one is preparedness.
Sorry, the third one is preparedness.
Right.
The fourth one is response.
Right.
The fifth one is recovery.
Right.
So
and that's a cycle of disaster management.
That's what we call disaster management. And 5 key areas. Now, I'll just go a little further. To say recovery sometimes is extended.
Okay.
So rehabilitation and reconstruction. But for simplicity, we say it's the 5 key areas of disaster management.
Right.
So that these 5 areas, starting with prevention and mitigation, and generally we join prevention and mitigation.
Right.
But it meant that the ODPM was required to look at these 5 areas and help Trinidad and Tobago become better prepared so that the work of the ODPM is in all these areas.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about those first 3 stages in particular, the preparedness, the mitigation, and the prevention.
Right.
Because as a part of that, of course, we want to be as prepared.
Good.
We want to be able to say, well, whatever going on come, we could stand up to it.
Good.
Yeah?
And I'll just change wrong the order, starting with prevention, because
Right.
prevention is the first thing. And it says, looking at those things a country can do to reduce its risk,
Right.
its disaster risk. And now, because of the evolution and what we've seen happening globally, we also speak about climate risk.
Right.
So the things a country has to do to prevent those risks. And it says that you can't prevent everything. Hazards will happen. You will have storms, you will have hurricanes, you will have earthquakes.
Act of God, as they call it.
Act of God. You will have these events.
Right.
And therefore, since you can't prevent it, you could mitigate some of the things. You could take actions to reduce your risk. Understanding that, even if you mitigate some of your risk, you still have to be prepared because something can happen. And those are key areas that the ODPM focuses. In fact, just yesterday, the ODPM with the Ministry of Health, because the ODPM really work with stakeholders in order to deliver disaster readiness and resilience in Trinidad and Tobago.
And the stakeholders are all government.
All government, but also the private sector. We also have the national societies like the Red Cross Society.
Okay.
We have Sewatiti. We have Is There Not a Cause? So civil society organization.
Okay.
But we also have, as part of the partnership, international organizations like UNDP, stationed in Trinidad. We have the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. But you know, it is one of those things where you have to look at what you have internally, what you have regionally, what you have internationally.
All hands on deck
All
approach.
hands on deck. And the organization that's coordinating all of that is the ODPM.
Okay.
Building capacity among our different agencies. So yesterday, we had the Ministry of Health working with the ODPM. And what we did was we had a session called Psychological First Aid for 2 days for first response agencies.
Okay.
And this was a special group of people that the ODPM was able to build a capacity in. And this is the Urban Search and Rescue Team Trinidad and Tobago now has.
Okay.
And we were able to get support from the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, CDMA for short, to build this capacity. And these persons now have the ability to take care of themselves in the event of a hazard situation, but also when they are responding and they see situations that will unnerve people generally, they are now better prepared. So those 3 areas are core because you want to, as much as possible, reduce the need for you to respond. And if you do the right things up front, you're building your resilience, you're building your readiness.
Now, Major General, people would argue that, all right, what is the actual, because you're talking about the preparedness of a few people to be able to respond to the hazards that may be, right? But what does that preparedness look like for the rest of the country?
And that example I used was yesterday. So it happened yesterday, right? In fact, the day before that as well. So, today's Wednesday. So yes. Monday and Tuesday, that action took place.
Right.
Also on Monday, there was another group that was preparing for, in the event we need to establish tents because the society has been impacted.
Right.
So what you have happening is individuals, organizations preparing. Now, the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Month is specifically designed to prepare our nation. And we chose the month of May. So we're in that period, and those two events were part of the period.
Right.
We chose the month of May because it is the month just before the start
of the hurricane
season.
Right.
Now, throughout the year, this committee is doing different things. It's doing policy, it's doing legislation, it's doing book programs, etc., strengthening our nation.
Right.
But during the month of May, they start from December, preparing a program of activity. So this program of activity would have touched schools. They would have touched communities. In fact, on Saturday, the team was in the community of Bellevue, Dundonald Hill. The whole NDPPM was launched in Pinal Debe. So it is touching as many lives as possible. And you will see that the ODPM in particular, as part of that committee, intensifies its education. So that video you just played at the start, that has been playing for the past 2 months, preparing the nation.
Now, so what I'm getting from you is that it's a lot of educational preparation. So the ODPM doesn't do anything when it comes to the on-the-ground preparation in terms of if you have to dig holes to make sure floods don't happen or whatever, those like strengthen houses, put down batons, like that's not the role of the ODPM.
Right. So what the ODPM does through other organizations, they would support that. So for example, what you just spoke about is one of the things that the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government would do through their CERT program.
Right, and then through the regional corporations
through the regional corporation. And as I mentioned CERT, I want to go to Tobago.
Right.
Because Tobago also has a CERT program, which is the core. So it is the community, bringing community people together so that they can strengthen their community. And you don't have to rely on the national agencies. Now, if it goes beyond your capacity, right? But I don't want us to reach there until you're ready because I want to speak about the whole disaster management cycle.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking on the bigger picture right now because we don't have much more time left. We have just about 2.5 minutes. But all right, so we established the beginning, the evolution, and we established what you actually do on a regular basis, on a yearly basis as the cycle continues, the disaster preparedness cycle. Tell me what's in store for the future for us, Trinidad and Tobago, and from the ODPM.
All right. So what the ODPM is working on, in fact, I brought a copy of it. What the ODPM has been working on, again with our stakeholders, is 3 principal documents. The first one is a national disaster risk reduction and management policy for the nation.
Okay.
And this is, again, I said, with our stakeholders. And we were able to get funding for this through SIDIMA. They assisted us with this. The second document that we've worked on over some considerable time is the legislation. Our legislation is the Disaster Measures Act, 3 pages. This one is 91 pages.
Okay.
Comprehensive, and we will help with this with the Trinidad and Tobago Red Cross Society, and I want to say thanks to them and the International Federation of Red Cross, who are the experts when it comes to disaster law. So they've helped us with this. The third thing we worked with the Ministry of Planning is what we call an integrated national adaptation plan. Trinidad and Tobago has a national adaptation plan, but the disaster management parts of it wasn't strong enough. So we've worked with them and going into the future, and this is a project we're really excited about. All these projects are going to influence these documents.
Right. Now, the nation might say, you bring these documents, say these documents don't mean nothing to the man on the ground who house going on flood or who has experienced bad weather, as the case may be. Tell me how these documents can assist the citizens of the country.
Right. So that's the third document, which is the one we're going into now, is the real critical one that is going to influence these documents. It's called a National Disaster and Climate Risk Assessment.
Right.
And it's going to look across our whole society at all our economic sectors, the financial sector, the health sector, and all these things. And it will look at the physical part, how we are building, where we are building, where we shouldn't build. If we decide to build in risky areas, how are we now going to reduce, or going back to the same mitigation and prevention? So it is going to touch the whole of our society. And the important part is this is very few countries in the world have reached where we have reached in terms of bringing this to Trinidad and Tobago. Right now, we have worked, again, after these things, you have to say thanks to the Caribbean Development Bank. They have offered Trinidad and Tobago a grant. We're waiting for the Ministry of Planning and the Solicitor General Office to just tidy up things, and we're good to go. Because that is really going to be the thing that is going to change the way we build, the way we protect ourselves, and the way as we go into the future, we continue to reduce it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to lose the development gains you've made.
Yeah.
We have made a lot of gains as a country. You don't want to lose that. And that document, along with these, will help the man in the street become safer.
Right. These documents have to pass through Parliament still, or they've already passed and they've been they've become part of the Constitution?
Right. So these documents here are in draft,
yeah.
and that principal document is going to influence them before they go through Cabinet, and in case of the law, through Parliament.
And at what stage, around, give me an approximate time frame for when we can expect it to appear in Parliament?
And everything really is dependent on that document that is being worked on for us. And I want to say thanks to the Ministry of Planning, thanks to the Solicitor General Office for the work that they're doing. So as soon as they provide us with the go-ahead, I would say within a year's time, we have a assessment plan that changes these documents in whatever way. And we have a more robust, what we call a more robust governance system. Nobody else is doing that in Trinidad and Tobago. That's the one of the many roles of the ODPM, to build capacity, strengthen Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, and definitely educate the nation as well. And thank you for coming this morning and sharing some of that education with us. And I know we still have a lot more to chat about in terms of the rules of the ODPM. You can see my excitement. I can see it. I can feel the excitement for sure. But unfortunately, we are out of time for this morning. So I thank you very much for joining us. And I look forward to us chatting about it again so we can continue to educate the nation.
Ruckus, let me say thank you to you and thank you for TTT for always being willing to facilitate the ODPM and the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee. I must shout them out. They work hard.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, Major General Rodney Smart, CEO of ODPM and the Chairman of the National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee, joining us to give some education this morning about the work that they do, the role that they play, and how you can better be safe and prepared for all the seasons that we have coming ahead, starting on June 1st with hurricane season. Let's take a quick break and we come back with more on the Now Morning Show. Stay tuned.